Okay, let's make a launch extension from scratch using Reactor Scaffold, React, TypeScript, all that fun stuff. I'm just going to start talking, and then maybe I'll edit this later and figure out what makes sense to leave in, or I'll just rant and this video will be like 4 hours long. Okay, so I know I want to make an extension called TruthyChain based on a previous blog post where I talked about this data element type that I like to use called TruthyChain that's in custom code. But as an exercise and to pass the time, let's make it into an extension. So in order to do that, I need to run Reactor Scaffold and install a bunch of stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a directory for my extension code, and I'm just going to call this TruthyChain. So I'm going to make that directory, and we'll cd into TruthyChain. And now I want to run Reactor Scaffold. So on this side of things, meaning the local development side, launch is called Reactor. So as the series goes further along, I'm going to use things like Reactor Package and Reactor Upload. Just know that that basically means launch. And if you ever want to interact with the launch API, the documentation is going to be called Reactor API. Anyway, let's run Reactor Scaffold. So I like to run this from npx instead of installing it directly because just to make sure that the team that's releasing this, or just to make sure that I'm always using the most up-to-date one. This auto-filled next in here, I don't think I'm going to use the next one. So yeah, let's just run this and then you'll see sort of how it works. So what this is going to do is essentially set me up the folder structure that I need to publish my extension, and also walk me through sort of how to add things and whatnot. So you run this when you first make your project, but then later if you want to add something to it, like another data element type or a configuration view, you run this again. You can run it as many times as you need to. But since I'm doing this the first time, there's a couple extra things that I'm going to need to fill out. So yeah, let's run this. So that's going to download, and then it's going to ask me some stuff. Okay, welcome to the scaffolding tool, blah, 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 blah. What do you want to call your extension? People already know that they're in launch, so you don't need to call it launch, whatever. Let's call this TruthyChain. I think I could put spaces in there. I can't remember if this is like the actual name that'll be shown, or it's like something that needs to be in some JSON file. Anyway, we'll just go. What platform is this going to use? This is going to be on the web. What do I want to start with? One, a short description of your extension, blah, 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 blah. This makes TruthyChain data elements. All this information is going to end up in a JSON file that I can change later. So right now I'm just going to, obviously I'll make that description a little more apt that says what it actually does. Who is the author? The author is me, which technically is Perpetua Digital. That's my Adobe partner name, and that's the organization with which I will pull API keys for in the future in order to actually upload this. Okay, what would I like to do? So this is where you need to set up like what your extension is going to do. So this particular thing I know is just going to be like a data element type, and that data element is going to need input from the user, but the extension itself is not going to need any sort of like configuration, anything. Like when you go to install it, you'll get that screen that says no configuration necessary or whatever. So the only thing that I'm going to need to do here is add a data element type. Well, I'm gonna need to do a couple things, but the first main thing that this extension is gonna do is just add a data element type. So what's gonna be my data element type? This is gonna be the name of like when you are making a new data element and you select which extension and then you select the type. in the core, it's like custom code or whatever, or all the other data element types. But this is what people are going to see. So you'll see all this stuff, where all this information ends up, like once I get going in the sandbox. So will this data element need a view for accepting settings from the user? Yes. So people are going to put data elements in here, and I'm going to build a TruthyChain out of them. And in order to do that, I need a view that pops up when you select this data type that lets you do that. And this scaffolding tool is going to make me like a plain HTML file, right? And then eventually I'm going to install a bunch of other stuff so I can write that HTML file with React and TypeScript and Adobe's Spectrum library, so that this actually looks like it belongs in Launch. So that's going to make that view for me, and that's going to be done. Two other things that I know I need to do, and this is just like when you're making any extension, is I'm going to need to add an Exchange URL. So no one looks at these. I don't know why you need them, but this is like if you go into any extension, you can sort of click like a little like marketplace listing for it that shows like screenshots and stuff. This is a requirement. You have to have it. It's kind of a pain to even set up, but it is what it is. You need to set this up before you publish your extension. I can't remember if it'll work privately or without this, but definitely to publish this to like a wider audience, you have to have this Exchange URL. So again, this can be changed. Let's just say changeme.com. This might get mad because I don't have HTTPS. Let's see. Must be a URL. Okay, so that probably just means I need example. Okay, so again, I'm going to change that later, but this is just to satisfy this like little walkthrough. And the other thing that I definitely need is an icon path. So you have to provide a couple different sizes of icons. I think that's this part, but you need the one that shows up on the extension, like tile, and maybe there's another one. I don't know, but this is going to ask me like where my icon is, and it needs to be an SVG. Relative path to the icon that will be displayed. Okay, so I think with my other extension, I just put something called icon.svg at like the top level directory. So I think if I just put that there, that should be good. Okay, yeah, so it's going to look for just in this folder icon SVG, and I think that's it. So yeah, I'm going to say I'm done. And now if I list all the documents or list everything in this folder, let's clear this out. ls, that's not much to look at. Let's look in the source folder. No. Okay. Let's open this up in VS Code. You can actually see what we're looking at here. So in here, what that scaffold tool did was generate all this stuff for me. So this is like your basic launch extension setup. Again, not much to look at, but this is like the building blocks and something that you have to do. So now that I have this, like, how do I actually develop this locally, right? So the other super important tool that Adobe provides for you is the Reactor Sandbox. So the Reactor Sandbox is the cool way of saying the local, it gives you a local instance of launch to like work in. So just like Reactor Scaffold, I like to just npx this instead of installing it directly. And then, that way I'm always using the latest version of launch or what have you. If you notice, the scaffold didn't make a package.json file, so there's no way to install dependencies. just after running Scaffold, but we'll come back to that later. But for now, let's just let's run the sandbox, and then we can see where all this stuff ends up. So npx at Adobe Reactor Sandbox, and this should spin up and show me a local launch instance. Okay, I thought for some reason this just popped up, but is that opening? No. Control click. No. Okay. There we go. Forgot what my own keyboard does. Okay, so this is the Reactor Sandbox. Don't worry about that one password thing. So this is just like a stripped down version of launch. So what you're going to see in here is this is like, this library sandbox is like, hey, this is the fake website that your launch instance is loaded on. The library editor is like a fake version of launch that you can load stuff into the sandbox. And then the view sandbox is where you can see it's sort of just helpful for local development when you're like making a template or something. You can just view it directly in here without having to go with like the 5 steps through making a data element. But if we look at my sandbox here, or I'm sorry, in my library, my fake instance of launch, I can see, I should be able to see my data element that was set up. So if I go to type, my TruthyChain extension is loaded, and it doesn't do anything, right? So save. Yeah, this is going to tell me like, hey, you can't save this because you haven't set anything up in here. But what you can see here is this view. Sorry, this view here is loading this data element template. So if I, let's see. Let's see, H1, TruthyChain. I don't know if this will update on the fly, but let's see. Let me refresh this. There we go. So, anything that I write in here in this TruthyChain, data element view, right? That's what's gonna show up when I select this data element. So in the next video, I'm gonna set up like React and TypeScript and stuff so that I can just generate this, and that I don't have to write like raw HTML to handle setting up all the styles and stuff, and like make sure that things work correctly, doing all this extension bridge registration and whatnot. But yeah, this is the basic setup of like, hey, whenever you want to build a launch extension, like these are the 2 basic things that you have to do. And then from here, we'll expand upon a more robust, more 2024, 2025 build setup for building, front end components like this. So stay tuned for that.